Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Astrology Squad. We're here to give you the astrological inside track on newsmakers, celebrities, and historical figures. And by doing so, we hope to teach you about the planets and the zodiac signs so you can learn more about your own horoscope, as well as what astrology can and cannot give us and what it can and cannot offer. My name is Frank Clifford. I'm a full-time astrologer, writer, and teacher. I run the London School of Astrology, which offers courses online and in London. I'm delighted to be here with my co-host, Richard Swatton, and our special and eminent guest, Pam Gregory. Pam, would you like to say a word or two about yourself?
Yeah, Pam Gregory. Have a very busy YouTube channel, Pam Gregory Astrology. Also on my website, I have several teaching videos and a long, detailed monthly newsletter, and also have written two books, You Don't Really Believe in Astrology, Do You? And How to Co-Create Using the Secret Language of the Universe.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Richard Swatton.
I'm a professional psychotherapist and astrologer. I lecture for the London School of Astrology, and I haven't been on my YouTube channel for about a year, but I do various bits and pieces on that to do with astrological topics, and I'm very pleased to be part of this astrological squad along with my friend and colleague Frank Clifford.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Pam. And Richard, some people will find your videos as well with the Armchair Detective, isn't that right?
Oh yes, I was on there for a little while. I no longer do that, but that was interesting at the time, looking at various infamous people. But I think he's long gone now.
Ah, okay. Well, speaking of infamous people, we've decided to pick Pisces Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, the third child of our Queen, ninth in the line of succession. Andrew served as a helicopter pilot in the Royal Navy, and he served as the UK Special Representative for International Trade and Investment for 10 years, up until 2011. More recently, though, he's notorious for his association with sex trafficker and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. And at the time of recording, he's just agreed to settle a child sex abuse claim from Virginia Giuffre. So we're going to look at his chart today, focus on the main themes, have a look at some forecasting transits and directions, and also we're aware that we're given a 3:30 birth time that was announced by the palace, but I looked in my notes and Pam very kindly alerted me to this, but there's a 3:38 p.m. time that comes from his physician and was announced also in the press, but the official word is it's 3:30. The 3:38 is more likely to be accurate simply because it's more accurate as a time, but it seems to have faded. So we'll keep in mind that the ascendant might be a couple of degrees different, along with the midheaven and the other angles. So we're going to start off with the sun, moon, and ascendant. He's a sun in Pisces. He's a moon in Scorpio. And Leo ascendant. Pam, would you like to start by adding anything about the big three, please?
Yeah, it's interesting. I often see the ascendant, which the ancient people saw as the point at which the spirit entered the body, as setting up a life issue. And with Leo, there is a very strong need to shine, a need to be recognized, appreciated, applauded perhaps. And sometimes that can act as a kind of compensation for what has happened in other parts of the chart, as it were. I think it's very interesting. Well, maybe we'll get into that in a moment, actually. Let me just stick to the simple things. Yes, he has Sun in Pisces and Moon in Scorpio. So these are both water signs. A lot of sensitivity and creativity with the Pisces side, tremendous amount of passion and intensity coming through. The Moon in Scorpio really digs deep. It needs to live with the passion. It needs to live with intensity. And that's really reinforced by Pluto directly opposing the sun. We're dealing with Plutonic energies in both areas there, because Pluto rules Scorpio. So there's this need to constantly live with a passion and intensity. However, if we look at that Pluto in the second house is to do with your money, your income, but also your sense of self-worth. And when Pluto is in the second house, there are often some issues around self-worth, and that is reinforced by Chiron, and we all have Chiron somewhere in our charts, being conjunct the sun. And indeed, the moon is square to Chiron. So something was happening when these aspects become exact. He's between 2 and 2.5 years old. You can see that easily because, 2738 is roughly 2.5 from the sun, and 25 is roughly 2 and a bit away from exactitude of that square. So something happened at the age of 2 to 2.5, which was wounding in some way. His other brother, Edward, wasn't born until 4 years after him, so it wasn't the arrival of another sibling. But if he was a client, you'd be discussing that with him. What was it that happened at that age? And therefore, coming back to the ascendant, there's an even greater need to shine as a compensation to cover up any kind of early wounding that may have happened. That's how really I'm seeing that. And indeed, that Leo ascendant, I think, is reinforced by Uranus in the first house being a kind of rugged individualism, wanting to go your own way, do your own thing, being a bit of a maverick, but of course being born into the royal family with all of its tradition and duty that really necessary. I think the other thing to say, going back to the sun here, the sun and Mercury being in this 8th house. The 8th house is the house of deep spiritual matters. It's also the house of trade. It's very interesting. He was an envoy for trade because it's other people's stuff, as it were. So it often turns up with trade. But also it's the house of sexuality and intimacy. So he has quite a lot of activity there with Mercury and the sun. And it's often the house of secrets as well. And the fact that Chiron is conjunct his sun and the sun is in that 8th house can perhaps suggest that there may have been some issues around that as his life proceeded. So those are the sort of broad sweeps I'd like to raise really about sun, moon and ascendant at that point.
Thank you, Pam. Richard?
Let's start with the Leo ascendant. That Pam started to talk about recognition. I think it's important to note that we sometimes don't know whether a person behind the chart is of an extroverted character or an introverted character. And I know we're supposed to, I can't remember who, Isaac added up the positive signs and the negative signs to tell whether you were introverted or extrovert. I don't think that's quite true. The extroverted character seeks self-worth, identity, and a recognition of their purpose in life by what other people think about them. It's as if it's in their outer deeds. And they are given value by the world, as it were. That's an extroverted activity. And so if he's an extrovert, he would seek recognition, but his purpose, this ascendant, is to find what is special about himself so that he can become great. Like Alexander the Great was a Leo. It's like they seek to become, they know there's something intrinsic in their life, which is important, special, noble, courageous, what all of those words that link around the Leo. So sometimes that's not seen by others. I think that's important. But it needs to be seen by the self. Leo, Jung was an introvert, and he found his self-discovery in all that Leo. Whereas, Aleister Crowley had a Leo ascendant. It was a typical extrovert, just wanting to be seen. No, it didn't matter. So I just wanted to say that the path of the Leo ascendant is to find your own uniqueness and specialness, and being born into nobility, he would have felt probably very entitled already. But I do see in this chart a a problem between duty and between that Leo, that Mars in Capricorn, that Capricorn, Saturn in Capricorn, is a sense of being told what to do.
Yeah.
A sense of duty, which he showed, of course, in the Falklands Wars, we know, and we'll probably come to that. But I wanted to stress also something about the Pisces, the two ways the Pisces can go. One, I think, in the chart of Einstein, was a very spiritual, involved, the self involved with the rest of life somehow. It's intrinsically part of it, and Pisces know that. But the constellation, the fish aren't just 180 degrees apart. They're actually like that. One of the fish on the end of the cord goes up to heaven. That's the spiritual pull towards the ethereal, towards the unmanifest areas of life. And one goes along the ecliptic. And the ecliptic side seek that solution or dissolution of the self in pleasure. So these are the vagabonds of life. These are the people that seek to get involved with something that seeks to push the boundaries. The poor, the seeks to dissolve the ego, seeks to dissolve the boundary, because in there is something special, something important. And sometimes people without a noble or higher cause can dissolve into that ecstasy, if you like, of the sign, the need for fusion with something greater than the self in order to give it value. So the sun here rules the first house, so they're very much connected to that. And as Pam said, 8th house is to do with sexual passion. This man, I feel, has never really found anything deeper in his life than sexuality. He's very well known, wasn't it, Randy or something, and all that. And we can see that moon in Scorpio come through as that, the need to dissolve, to disappear into some frenetic, passionate emotionality. And how are you going to do that but through sex? And I feel as if everything has been focused into the sensual element. And that sensual element for a water sign is a way to dissolve the personality and feel connected to everything. That's why they call orgasm la petit mort, isn't it? The death, the little death. And it's an indication where you let go, or at least we hope that that's the case. And temporarily you feel one with your partner or the world or that. But unfortunately, I think we've got the Pisces fish across the ecliptic. We've got that descending into trying to find passion and understanding and meaning of that Sun opposed Pluto, which requires depth. And now he's going to get some depth, because we know when we come onto the Pluto transit of it's pulled him into that, and he's going to have to do some deep thinking as his life has been destroyed in a way by these passions which nobody can understand. And there is some cause for concern about this recent court case that he has, and we must be careful here. Nobody knows what's going on, really. Maybe he did have some naivety perhaps in him. It seems to be that way, but nevertheless, I do feel he's been drawn in one direction, and this Pluto transit has destroyed that. It's destroyed his reputation. It's destroyed his nobility, if you like. And I wonder whether this is really a turnabout for him to think much, not just think more deeply, but to reach some kind of other depth other than the desire nature, the satisfaction of sexual desire, which has a spiritual pull underneath it. But actually you need to keep on repeating those experiences, drug experiences, whatever they are, in order to get the same satisfaction. And you see, and then you just go deeper and deeper into the mire of that, and never really achieve a solid a solid meaning, a solid purpose to life. Anyway, look, those are my initial ideas about what's gone on with Andrew and what's gone on with this Pisces.
Yes, thank you, Richard. And you're right to say, apart from Andrew and Virginia, no one else really knows the
No.
detail of that in terms of the truth of it. But it's always fascinating when these things come out and why they come out. Um, I've often noticed, and Pam's touched on this, and Richard has with the Leo ascendant, is that there's a lot of pressure to be the golden child. He's always referred to as the Queen's favorite son.
That's right.
And
Golden
until you find what is special about yourself, which you both referred to, there's a sense of, well, I'm entitled, I've got everybody's respect, I get all my teddy bears put on the bed and around the bedroom, and everything. I'm pampered. But really, what do I count for? What have I done to deserve it? And I think there can be a crisis with that sense of entitlement versus the sense of achievement.
Yeah.
And the Capricorn sixth house of Venus, Mars, and Saturn. It's obvious that the crisis of the Pluto and the Scorpio, the sort of diffuseness of the Pisces, at work, he can be trained. He can work hard with that Capricorn sixth house emphasis here. And so this is somebody that probably needs a structure to go to work, to be told when to clock in, what to do. The rest of it, and without that, without a mission, or at least I'm representing the firm, very Capricorn, he may be without that particular guidance. Yes, known as Randy Andy, at the beginning he was the attractive royal and dating Kustark, and he certainly found his Pisces through her, the glamour, the ex-porn star, the photographer, all very Pisces images. And of course, his midheaven, which is what we're known for, our reputation, how people name us, see us, is in Aries, so that Randy Andy and that sense of being the one who's going to have a party, the party boy. So the Leo Aries combo is very much about the individual journey, as Richard says, but there's so much depth, crisis, power, seduction in the rest of the chart. It's fascinating how this has really come to the surface. The key that I was looking at was the Sun in Pisces opposite Pluto, which I think we should speak about a little bit more. Just to add a few things, I think Sun-Pluto people, when you have an aspect between your Sun and Pluto, there's often an experience of either a crisis or a situation that is humbling. And that might be through a Pluto transit, which we'll look at in a moment, or it might be something that forces us to resurrect, to morph into something new. And he's a Sun-Pluto opposition. So in a way, the invitation of his life is to do that for other people. Oppositions are what we receive from others, but also how we can empower other people. He's born 10 days before the very famous NLP self-help guru, Tony Robbins, who has that Sun-Pluto opposition. And you watch that as with that very insightful, deep, transformative process, that big drama that Tony Robbins is so good at stimulating in people. We don't see that with Prince Andrew. We see it at the moment, his involvement of Sun-Pluto with the powerful who impact him, and him perhaps being invited, seduced by glamour, by power. The thing about Pisces, of course, is that it can feel victimized, it can live in denial, and it can feel persecuted by life. So the transits that we'll look at in a moment, I'm sure, I think are going to reinforce the idea of what have I done to deserve this, a sense of persecution, rather than a sense of enlightenment and understanding and digging deep and exploration, which is often what Pluto's about. Pam, would you like to say anything about the Sun-Pluto, or move into the Pluto transits?
I'll move into the Pluto transit in a moment. Just really to pick up on some of that discussion, which is wonderful. I really look at that Capricorn energy as about status and reputation being so important. and having that, because Saturn is semi-square his sun, as he grew up, he had to behave in a certain way, which was, very traditional, obviously extremely conservative, fulfilling the duties of the royal family. And yet, where was he? Because I see Chiron conjunct his sun as almost like a polo mint. There's a hole in the middle, that it's very hard to find a sense of self or center. You're going through, a role or, a set of protocols without really finding self. And so the other end of the polarity to all that, Capricorn, is Jupiter in Sagittarius, which can get in the fifth house of recreation. So this is the party boy, isn't it? This is going over the top, staying too long, drinking too much, having the best time, because it's again, it has no boundary. And there's a lot of secrecy also in the chart. The sun is in the 8th house of secrets. The moon is in Scorpio, which is connected to secrets. It rules the 12th house. That's connected to secrecy. Neptune is squaring the ascendant-descendant axis. There's a lot of secrecy. So there's a lot, the secrecy was necessary to cover up this split between, the presented royal dignitary, as it were, and all this secret life of a wild party boy that was very involved, allegedly, in a lot of illicit sexual activity. So that's, that's really, really interesting. And that is interesting, actually, because at the end of 2019, I did my last kind of local in-person talk. And at the end of the talk, I said, I think Prince Andrew is going to start to come into the news in quite a significant way, because it was at that point that transiting Pluto was starting to square that midheaven. 22 of Aries, because it was at 22 of Capricorn. And of course, the midheaven is also to do with your status, your reputation in the world, as well as your career. And so that was starting to happen in late 2019 and all the way through to the end of 2020. If we go with the later birth time of 3:38 p.m., then that is still just about operational now. But even without that birth time, if we stick to the 3:30 birth time, other aspects have taken over from that. Shall I keep going on that, Frank?
With the transits, shall we stop for a second and look at the Sun-Pluto? Is there anything you want to add to that? Or
yeah, I think there's a sense of unfathomability with that. It's a word that it keeps coming up with Pluto, this sense of unfathomability, that in some way you have to keep transforming self. And you can't even find the reason why. It's unfathomable, but it's almost like a pressure cooker effect to keep on changing self and growing beyond what you were born with. But of course, it can also be extremely sexual. It can deepen the sexual urge because Pluto rules Scorpio. And so that can lead you into some pretty murky territory. Pluto, for me, also is connected to underhand, taboo, criminal sexual activity as well. It can manifest in that way in its shadow side. And so, with these polarities in the chart, it would have perhaps been very understandable if he was drawn into such activity that, there's potential in the chart to do that for sure.
Thank you. And Richard, yeah.
If you take the sun as the urge towards manifesting your deepest potential while you have life, the sun is life. The sun is the life force. Alan Leo called it the life bringer. It brings life to us. It's light. But you could also see the sun as a kind of crucible, or something that receives. And if it receives Pluto, then it is destined somehow to go through a death and a resurrection. In order to be resurrected, Frank, what you said, that word, you have to die to something, and you either surrender to that force of Pluto, which is to take the ego down into the bowels of the earth, to transform it in some way. If you don't do that consciously, life will do it for you in some way. You will be taken down. We know Pluto is so linked to the myth of Ereshkigal and Inanna, where she has to descend the steps. She has to descend the steps into the underworld for her sister's birthday. And what that means, which is the actual, the dance of the seven vows, those seven steps, is taking off things, self-revealing. What is life based on? And that myth, and when you come into the transits, we'll see it, that you have to be taken down. So it's either a volunteer transformation of one's identity, yes, or you're pulled down in some way to change. And we must remember that the sexuality and orgies, and its very animal nature, yes, we hope that it's linked with love, but sometimes it isn't. And when you descend into that, you descend into an animal part of the nature. It's very Plutonic, it's very Virgo, and it's very earthy. And you descend into that realm of pure sensate experience, which is wonderful for pleasure and wonderful for release of emotions and so on. But if you've got no other way of transforming your life, as I said before, you have to keep on doing it. It's as if you have to go back to that instinctual subconsciousness with another person in that orgiastic state of some kind. It's pure pleasure. And that, absolutely right, Pam. There's the party goer of that Jupiter. Yeah, this is the Air Miles Andy, isn't it? Over the hills, ruler of the ninth house. Where do I belong? Where do I belong? Everywhere. I'm here, I'm there, I'm everywhere. So I just wanted to say about that Pluto, that we all have to find our own way with Pluto. It's a force and pattern beyond us, which takes us to transform our identity. And it can often feel like a death, and it often feel it's done by shame, it's done by revealing, it's done by uncovering. And this is deeply, deeply disturbing to a sun in the eighth, which in a way has concealed his true identity. Absolutely right, Pam. He's concealed it. It's behind the veil. I love that Noel Till phrase of the sun in the eighth. He said, people are hard to reach when the people are hard to reach. It's just a little phrase, but do we really know him, or did he have that puff of smoke around him, that kind of glamour that you mentioned? We're back to Alice Bailey, actually, the 11 or 12 glamours that we can get caught up in. And I think he wanted to be famous all his life, but was given too much too quickly, and had a sense of entitlement to it all. And although he did that stint, 12 years, I think it was, with being a helicopter pilot, I think he's been drawn into that rather murky world of pleasure, because there isn't a spiritual element to it. And this could be the beginning of a transformation for him to really, really dig deep, rather like it was for his father when he came across spirituality in his midlife crisis. So we shall see.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard. That's probably a good opportunity to look at the solar arc. Should we start with that, Pam, and then we'll move to the transits?
Okay, yeah. Now, in terms of solar arcs, let me just see, because what is very interesting is, and yeah, you've got it there clearly, Frank, the solar arc Venus is just on the world axis. And when that happens, it means that principle, i.e. females in his life, as it were, becomes visible. That principle becomes visible to the world, as it were.
0° Aries point. Yeah.
So it's 0 degrees of the cardinals, the world axis. So it's right on. So that was exact, I believe, in January, and a lot was coming out at that time. That was when the court case was running, but also just right now as well, he's got solar arc Jupiter and conjunct his sun. And Jupiter, of course, is connected to the law as well, the law, courts, justice. So it's almost that he might have had some kind of a lucky break, because that's when he paid an out-of-court settlement. Interesting, eighth house to the other party, other people's money. So he's giving her an out-of-court settlement. However, I think there's more to run with this, because he's also got coming up solar arc Moon conjunct Mars, and that will become exact, I think, in June. So that again will highlight any issues around career and status that are brewing at the time. And we've also got some big Pluto transits that we'll hopefully look at in a moment as well, because they really set the picture as well. He also, let me just see, looking down the timeline. No, I think the rest are all transits, actually. Transits and eclipses.
Right.
Yeah, transits, eclipses, and one progression. Yeah.
It's interesting. After the moon hits Mars, it will reach Venus about a year and a half later. Maybe his quote unquote redemption might be back in. I think he lives with Sarah still. Does he still live with Sarah? I wonder whether there'll be some sort of move to have him settle back down with her in some way. I wonder that moon Venus may suggest that, a sort of resurrection in that sense of him being the family man that was seen in the 80s and early 90s. Let's pop on the transits.
Sorry, Frank, just before you leave that as well, just to note that solar arc Uranus will be coming to conjunct the IC and oppose the midheaven in 2 years' time, 2.5 years' time. So there's some kind of an overhaul, a complete relaunch of some kind of who he is, his living arrangements, as you say, but also potentially who he is in the world.
Thank you. Yes. And it's interesting. A few years ago, I was asked to look at the chart of Sarah Ferguson, and she had, if I'm not mistaken, Uranus coming to the sun by solar arc. And I remember thinking or saying at the time that there may be a new relationship on the horizon or something going, but she's sort of wedded to Andrew. So the Uranus to the sun, I think, was the shock and disruption of what she's had to go through as the mother and of his daughters and ex-wife, who's still very involved with him, I think. Let's take a look at the transits. And what I'll do is I will select just the outers and slow ones so we can see that.
Yeah, that's great.
Great. So, Richard, did you want to say something first about particularly the Pluto transit or Saturn?
A little bit about both. From a purely kind of predictive place, we have Saturn, the greater malefic in medieval and traditional astrology, in the 7th house. In other words, it's coming through other people. He feels put down, he feels oppressed, he feels a certain sense of injustice, perhaps, and a pressure from all of those Saturnian people beyond him, i.e. the firm, as you keep on putting it. So maybe he didn't want to settle out court, but because it's the Platinum Jubilee, I think he feels under the pressure of the other. Yes, he may have been helped out with the money by the other, just to kind of flatten things down and so on. So on a very mundane point of view, when we were predicting things, we can see this there. But what this also means is he has to come to terms with his own relationship life. It's been a pull down. He can't get away with this kind of party Jupiter in Sagittarius anymore on the 5th. He's had to become very serious. He's had to become very solid. And I think it has pulled him down. Going over the 7th house, it is always some kind of something in the world when Saturn hits an angle, something happens to if you like, bring a person back down from the clouds that they've been on, or the inner journey. It really pulls them into their incarnation and limits them, constricts them. And to the degree that he's been out with that Jupiter in Sagittarius is the degree to which Saturn pulls you back in by one means or another, death and taxes, but in this case, salacious scandal. In 2 years, about 2 years, the same as that Uranus, it'll be conjunction the sun, and this will be him reconciling. Who is he? The Saturn sun is the aspect of self-definition. It says, what are you here for? What are you going to do? And for some people, it's a depressive time because they've spent the sun as in an ideal. This is who I am. This is my life. And I think, like you, Pam, he may have been led there's a kind of emptiness in there filled up by sex and pleasure and so on. I think we're on the same idea here, and that he needs something of a substantial nature to define who he is. I have a feeling also there's a lot more to come out from those oppressors of him that's oppressed him and done him down. And I think there's a lot more to come out, as I say, from those other people related to this case. Virginia Roberts, for one. I think we've got a lot more to hear about her and from her. The Pluto, well, we all know. When it comes round to us, Pluto asks us to get rid of those things in our nature in relation to the planet it transits that are no longer serving us, no longer serving the purpose for which we're born, no longer serving wholeness. And so if we've been corrupt, Pluto brings out the corruptness of the planet. And in this case, it's Mars. His reputation, rule of the 10th, is damaged. It's to do with his sexuality. It's to do with his position, status in the world, and also his sense of running away from a duty to which he was born, which is not necessarily a confinement, which is, again, I agree with Pam. It's as if he's got this one half of Jupiter, fire, air, Uranus in the first house rebel, and yet he is born into a family in which, unless he obeys a certain dutiful framework, a control, no father figure is ready to guide him, then it's run wild. So this is a call back, I think, to a deeper sense of his purpose in life as a member of the royal family, how he is going to come back, how he's going to resurrect himself, which is a great word, I think. But you have to go into hell before you resurrect, and he's not, he's in that now. But what we can say is, if you see an outside event like this, so very clearly described by the horoscope, Pluto pulling him down, exposing him to and the rest of it, you know that in some way it's right for him, because it's shown by astrology. What's happening inside the outside world is shown by the symbolism of this astrology very clearly. So there's a coincidence of outer showing and an inner core, if you like, to bring himself more to himself. So I think in some way this is fated for him, that his own reputation, his own getting away from his true purpose in life, if you like, has finally pulled him down into that Sun-opposed Pluto. He's now got his comeuppance, as they say, with Pluto in some way. But it isn't just about revenge. It's about him transforming himself into a true, to become truly genuine. You know what I mean? To become integrated into what it's, and to try and find a way of integrating these experiences in a way which will bring him into a more humble sense of himself than this exalted expectation of the Leo ascendant.
Thanks, Richard.
King Andy is no longer, that Leo ascended. He's been taken back into the gutter, if you like, and exposed. Yeah. So that Pluto is doing its job, but I have a feeling when it moves on to that Venus in a couple, soon, we shall be also hearing about the other people that brought him down.
Yeah. Thank you, Richard. Pam, what's your feeling about the Pluto?
Yeah, just to pick up very briefly on Saturn opposing Uranus, that is so clear, isn't it? That, the authority figures, the rules, the regulations, you have to behave properly, you can't run renegade, you can't be a maverick, you have to fit in with the system. So it's very clear how that's worked. And yes, coming on to transiting Pluto, very much agree with what Richard was saying. This is the dive into Hades, isn't it? Into the dark, crossing the Styx alone. And Pluto seems to operate, transits of Pluto seem to operate that anything that is not of the highest integrity and transparency will be revealed. Yeah. And that isn't my judgment, it's the judgment of the universe, judgment of the cosmos. However, if you've behaved altruistically and with integrity, this can take you to empowerment. This can be a transit, conjunct his midheaven ruler, of empowerment. but it doesn't seem to be heading that way right now. So tremendous intensity of feeling. I mean, immense intensity, because it's conjunct his Mars, but also, as Richard said, that's going to be coming onto that Venus. In fact, it's on his Mars, conjunct his Mars through this year and even into January next year. So we haven't seen the end of those hits on career, reputation, status fully yet. And then with Venus, Pluto conjunct Venus, which is intense feelings around women, and again diving deep into what women represent in his life. And Venus is also the co-ruler of that 10th house, plus the ruler of the 4th of his personal family life as well. And that transit continues until, I think, August 2023. So I think we still have a lot to come in that respect. I very much agree with Richard. Also, all through this year, he has the secondary progressed moon moving through his 8th house. And this, to me, is a time when almost, if things have kind of gone astray a little, it can feel like purgatory. You can feel very alone. You're digging deep into your own sort of private life around issues of the 8th. But to me, the 8th is also about issues of power. Where has power been used in the world externally to you, but also how you have used your own power? Have you used it well, again, with integrity, or have you misused your power? So that secondary progressed moon in the 8th, I think, is very, very revealing. And then we have, I'm going to talk about another couple of transits in a moment, but in fact, because that transiting Saturn is coming on to square his moon, ruler of the 12th house. And the 12th house could be considered, again, secrets, or in old astrology, self-undoing even. And that's going to be running from May this year through to February 2023. Again, issues with women, could be issues with mother, the queen. It can be a feeling of great introspection. And have you spent too much time maybe on your personal life and not enough in your outer world activities, or the other way around? There's a kind of introspective rebalancing of life priorities with that. But also he has Chiron semi-square his sun, which is his chart ruler, again from May through to March 2023. So, you know, we've got quite a lot running here. So transiting Chiron semi-square his sun in that house of sexuality and secrets, where he's going to feel wounded again. He's going to feel wounded. He may feel it's unjust, it's not fair, it's not right, but nevertheless, it's happening. That's, as I say, from May until next March. He also has, fascinatingly, and I'm using some Till aspects here, of the Quindecile, which is a very intense, obsessive 165-degree aspect. All through 2022, he has transiting Pluto quintile his ascendant, his identity. Who am I? Who am I now? With profound intensity. He's churning around that issue. It's also quintile his midheaven. What do I do in the world? What's my career? My, you know, reputation's in tatters potentially. Who am I as an outer being in the world? And that is particularly running into, again, the early months of 2023. And just to talk about briefly the eclipses, the solar eclipse on the 30th of April is opposing his Neptune, ruler of the 8th house of secrets and sexuality, and ruler of the, in this chart it's just the 9th, isn't it? Yeah, ruler of the 9th house of legalities. He also has the lunar eclipse on the 16th of May conjunct his moon. Lunar eclipses, I think, are quite difficult. That's at 25 of Scorpio. And I think those are really quite difficult, and again could be unearthing issues around women that 12th house ruler he would prefer to keep secret. So I think we've got a lot more to come out, which he's going to have to handle. And I agree with Richard very much. It could be the making of him, but boy, this is as tough as it gets, I think, for anybody to handle.
Yeah, and also this is a year of celebration. And so he may be absent with that Saturn moon and the eclipse, the lunar eclipse on the moon, and it really should be celebrating his mother, and yet perhaps he's the dark sheep of the family at the moment. Obviously he is, but that sense of being banned from the occasion. The other thing that, apart from the Pluto transit, that I noticed is that I use equal houses, and the transiting Uranus at the moment is on the zenith point, which is exactly square the ascendant descendant, and that's been there back and forth. It's really seen him lose all the different titles, the different there's a real sense of him being banned, him being cut off in that Uranian way, work-wise. Of course, his ex-wife was famous for making him a royal for hire, and there will be people that will be happy to hire him for talking about perhaps, giving speeches and giving different maybe that's the way forward for him. But certainly Uranus moving into the equal 10th would suggest a new career, a sense of being cut off from the previous one. The other thing that reminded me of the Pluto transits was the idea that Pluto being linked to authenticity, which you both mentioned, of course, and the resurrection, but the idea of nemesis as well, and Pluto being the avenger of hubris, being the punisher of extreme pride. And that's what we're seeing. That's what we saw in the 2019 interview. He was picked up for not apologizing to or empathizing with the victims, and at the moment there's a detachment between what people are needing him to feel and what he's showing. So the Pluto transit, I think, really brought that into focus. I think it was Liz Green that said anything that is buried deep down in the cellar has a way of burrowing under the house and ending up on the front lawn during a Pluto transit. And I think that's what we're seeing. Any final words from either of you?
Yeah, I'd just like to pick up on that when you're dealing with transits, often you're dealing with the natal position. The natal position seems to be there for life. It's an issue. It's a pattern that develops, and the transit somehow develops the natal position. So we can see all of this stuff that we've been talking about. Ruler of the 10th is Mars. This is the pull down, if you like, of his reputation, his titles, his public persona. It's all demolished. That demolishing ball of Pluto. But I do see an enactment here of that great myth of Virgo and Pluto, the abduction of Persephone into the underworld. We know these myths, but what does that really mean? It means the loss of a certain kind of innocence in him, that he can no longer play that naive innocence that he's been found out in a way. But the fate of Persephone is to rise again. And that isn't necessarily belonging to Pluto itself, but of the products of Pluto. The results of Pluto's influence is that the female can come back up, and she will always be wedded to Pluto, god of the underworld, but she comes back up and nature is there again and it blossoms again, but then there's a winter. So there's a sense here, if you like, that at the nub end of this, if he can get through it, if he can take the lessons, if you like, find a way of absorbing all of what has happened to him, that he will be resurrected, he will come to the surface. And I wonder if he will learn eventually to be able to apologize for the things in his own nature. Not as in mea culpa. I mean, we're all culpable for something or another, but that humiliation of the Saturn, the humiliation that the Pluto has pulled. And I wonder whether I really do think he needs to, in some way, learn to do that. Apologies to his family, apologies to those other people for the things that he's caused. But of course, politicians have a terrible thing with that, don't they? They never apologize just in case they're caught legally. So he may be caught in that mess. But I'm talking about being humbled, if you like, before the greater powers than he that have pulled him down, or which he's unwittingly given himself to.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard. Any final words, Pam?
Yeah, just a couple, really. You know, it's so interesting, isn't it, with the myth of Persephone linked to the transit of Pluto, that Persephone was kidnapped as a young maiden.
Yeah.
And I think somehow that seems very relevant to this whole situation.
Well, exactly.
But the you know, the cosmos will always give us opportunities for turnaround, and Pluto really is offering that transformative opportunity, not only to dig deep, but to come back up to the light, following that myth, and be transformed, be wiser, deeper, kinder. And so the universe is always giving us those with the transit potentials.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you both. And Virginia Roberts, has her Mars at 27 Cancer, directly opposite that.
I didn't know that.
And also her ascendant is 11 degrees Leo, which a lot of people have mentioned. So it's fascinating how intricately connected they are in ascendants and also in Mars-Venus connections as well. So thank you both. I hope everyone's enjoyed that. That's been quite a revelation, and truly appreciate your time on that. Thanks to my co-host Richard Swatton and to our special guest Pam Gregory. You can find us on www.astrologysquad.com, and we look forward to seeing you later, another time. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.